Добрий день, шановні колеги. Ми дуже раді вас вітати в Українському кризовому медіа-центрі. Мене звати Надія Афанасьєва, я є директором.
Greetings, dear colleagues. I'm the director of the Institute of the Policy, and today we wanted to talk with you about about different topics. It's very important for us to raise these issues today because in Ukrainian media landscape we can see a different interpretation of multi-level governance, and it's very important for us to support discussions around this topic. And even though this topic is also represented by the fundamental cluster, which, as you probably already know, is covering by the latest one. And therefore, multi-level governance for Article 22 and for fundamental cluster is one of the key aspects. Besides that, it's also important in the context of the foundations, in the context of the of how they work, operate in Ukraine, and it is important for us to understand what is the level of the regional, local level, and how to separate the authorities between these three levels. And today we're going to talk about this with the representatives of the European Commission, DG Regio, with the representatives of the organization TSIM, and also with the experts of the international politic governance. And first of all, I would like to pass the floor to Jolanta Svetkovska, Director General of Regional and Urban Policy of the European Commission. Ms. Jolanta, we are online with you. I will switch your slides, and you have to see your slides on the screen. Please, the floor is yours.
Good morning, good afternoon, Nadia. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak about the multi-level governance, a very important subject for the EU cohesion policy, which is expressed in our jargon by so-called partnership principle. My name is Jolanta Świątkowska. I work for the European Commission DG Regio, Director General in charge of the regional and urban policy. We are in charge also of enlargement issues. So we are actively involved in the negotiations of the Chapter 22 negotiations, and we are in touch with our Ukrainian counterparts. And to make sure that the screening meeting goes as best as possible. The next slide, please. Yes. So before jumping into the partnership principle and the EU cohesion policy, I will very briefly talk about the EU cohesion policy, its main objectives, main features, just to give a little bit of advertisement of this policy, which covers 1/3 of the EU budget and is a big source of funding for especially poorer member states and regions. Next slide. So it will be very important as well for Ukraine upon accession. Next slide, please. So I will briefly talk about EU cohesion policy objectives. So the general aim of the cohesion policy is to strengthen the economic, social and territorial cohesion of the Union. It is enshrined in the treaty, and in particular the Union aims at reducing disparities between the levels of development of various regions, and mostly the poorest ones, the less favored regions. In the beginning, in fact, the policy was called regional policy, but with subsequent enlargements of poorer countries like Greece, Portugal, Spain in the 80s, it turned into cohesion policy. So also target not just regions, but as well countries through a cohesion fund, which is available for all countries whose gross national income is less than 90%. Next slide, please. So the main features of the cohesion policy are its strategic focus and concentration of resources on the poorest regions in line with the policy objective. On the EU policy objectives also, like for instance, European Green Deal or competitiveness. Now the objectives are changing a bit. We have midterm review in the cohesion policy, where for instance defense issues come as well important for obvious reasons. We also concentrate our spending. Which means that we need a very good project pipeline, because if within 3 years money is not spent, then it's decommitted. I think the main feature which distinguishes the policy from the external instruments, financial instruments which are available, for instance, for Ukraine, is that it's managed through shared management. That means that ministries and regional authorities of member states are managing the programs. They are selecting projects, they are contracting projects, meaning signing contracts with beneficiaries. And the European Commission is mainly involved in programming, so in planning how the money will be spent within programs or partnership agreement. But the day-to-day management is done by ministries and regional authorities. I will not go through all the details because we will be, but I will talk about territorial development. Of course, is a very important feature because we give lots of importance to place-based approach. We have so-called territorial instruments, which are based on integrated territorial strategies, where territorial bodies like cities or even or smaller or communities are in charge of preparation of strategies together with different stakeholders. And the last but not least, the partnership principle. Next slide, please. I will talk about this in more detail now. So this is really the key feature of the EU cohesion policy. The main feature of it is that partners, meaning stakeholders, such as regional, local, urban, and other public authorities, economic and social partners, meaning trade union representatives, for instance, our employers' organizations, relevant bodies representing civil society, so environmental sector, for instance, or civil society linked to, for instance, defense of human rights, and in some cases research institutions were relevant, need to be invited to prepare programs and then to implement them as well. And this is done according to European Code of Conduct on Partnership, which is a Commission regulation where in detail it is described how this partnership should be implemented. For example, it's important that the national governments of member states use very transparent procedures to select those partners. And what is important as well, those partners, those stakeholders of different programs, they need to be supported as well. So that there are technical assistance funds which can be spent on increasing their capacity. For instance, that they can organize some studies, they can launch studies on specific subjects. There are as well the costs of participation of monitoring committees are reimbursed by those partners, so that they can be really equal partners to national and regional authorities. Next slide, please. So those partners are participating in the program monitoring committees, and this is a really important institution where partnership is exercised. because the program monitoring committees, they have very important role, but they are involved in program implementation through examining the progress of what's being achieved, and very importantly, the program monitoring committee, so made also of those partners, approve the criteria for selection of projects, and that's very important because that's how the money is spent. And the monitoring committees need to ensure really balanced representation of both member states' authorities and representatives of different stakeholders. So for us, we would not approve a program if we don't see that this partnership is being properly implemented, so that the program has been in fact discussed with the partners and the feedback was given, and the partners sit also in the monitoring committee. Next slide, please. So Ukraine already participates in some programs, Interreg programs within cohesion policy, and the partnership has to be also applied in those programs. Of course, it's little bit. Partnership is applied a bit different, slightly differently in transnational programs, because we cannot have representatives of different partners on the same level, like for instance mainstream programs, so non-inter programs or cross-border programs. So we are not asking that representatives of all possible partners are from each member state or country not part of the union, like Ukraine, are involved in, for instance, transnational programs. Nevertheless, we are also requiring that this principle is applied, and we have launched recently a study which is checking how this principle is applied also in Ukraine. And two programs are being examined: Poland-Ukraine program and the Black Sea Basin program. So the idea is not to name and shame if something has not been done, but to see what are the needs in terms of further technical assistance, what are the gaps. And there will be an event in Brussels beginning of next year, where the results of the study will be presented together with best practice examples from different member states. And Ukraine will be also invited to this event. I hope that we'll see maybe some of you beginning of the next year. And the last slide, where I put together some information sources. I encourage you to have a look. So everything you need to know about cohesion policy is on our InfoRegio site. I added here also the reference to the European Code of Conduct on Partnership, where really this issue of multi-level governance and partnership is being quite thoroughly dealt with in our regulation. And also I added a handbook of territorial and local development strategies. I think it's interesting handbook how to prepare integrated territorial strategies on different territorial levels, and how also to include partnership principle. That means working together with all relevant stakeholders, because we believe in region that the involvement of stakeholders increases the effectiveness of public investments, as they are more aligned with local and territorial needs. Thank you very much. I just want to say sorry for my voice, because I'm not very well today. I hope you could hear me well. If you could tell me as well how to switch on the translation, because I could follow an idea more or less, as I'm Polish, so the language is not so different, but still would be nice to get translation as well in English. Thank you.
Jolanta, thank you very much. You can switch translation in Zoom. There is switching to English of our translator, if you can do this. And thank you very much for your speech and for your attitude towards us, even being not very good. You are still with us. Thank you for this. То, Йоланта, ви можете нас вже...
Yolanta, I hope you can hear us in English. Do you? Yes. З якою є...
Yolanta, we will send you in the chat a message how to
Okay.
connect.
Thank you.
Please follow the chat and we will continue. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Dear colleagues, with this, we are moving to the next stage, to our presentation, to the presentation of our small research, which we prepared together with the Kyiv Institute of the National Policy. I would like to pass the floor to Alexei Rostislav Tamanchuk, senior expert of the Ukrainian Institute of International Policy. And also I'd like to draw your attention that we have live, and you can ask the questions, that is for those who are watching us online. Thank you very much, Nadia. Thank you, dear colleagues who joined us. We have Olena Shulyak, head of the committee of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. And of course, I'm very glad to see Yolanta Svetkovska. That is a person who is directly engaged in Article 222 of the negotiation process and a representative individual. And in my opinion, it is so important to have synchronization of different channels of this kind of communication on this stage of the negotiations when Ukraine is engaged with different directorates, and because in every article we have different understanding, different interpretation of how the policies should work, and we have prepared the small research which will be published today before the end of this day, and on the grounds of this research we would like to present our opinion on what is going on and what is happening with multi-level governance. So we started to hear this term more and more often, and on some stage it seemed that all the participants, all the stakeholders understand what is multi-level governance, but nevertheless, considering the fact that during 2024 we didn't have much progress in implementation of some recommendations and tasks on Article 22, we have the understanding that probably these kind of terms like multi-level governance might be, so to say, the first steps which will help us, help Ukraine to get more engaged in the process on aligning Ukrainian legislation and the tools which work in the European Union for the implementation both of the strategy of cohesion and regional development in general. With this, dear colleagues, let me tell a few words about multi-level governance. So what do we have with multi-level management? Not to play with different terms, let's try to understand what kind of terms is it and what is that is the instrument of coordination between the authorities on the national, regional, on the local authorities in the process of forming and implementation of policy. And it's not about how the different divisions have to work on the level of the region or how the management is conducted on the local level horizontally. So we are talking about engagement of different stakeholders who are on different levels. And in the European Union, this term has its peculiarity because they have not only the authorities on the national, regional, and local level, they add to the level of the European Union. And that is something I would like to thank Yolanta for, because she gave us a direct message on how the multi-level governance works. And if we try to characterize what is included in multi-level management governance, in this case, we would like to emphasize your attention on three main things. So first is coordination between different levels of governance, namely on the distribution of the authority. And the second one is engagement of the stakeholders to the process of forming the policy. And the third one, transparency and accountability in the process of forming, implementation, and achievement of the results. What do we have in Ukraine? If we try to consider the recommendations which were provided to Ukraine by the European Union and try to understand what is mentioned there about multi-level governance and how important it is, if we consider that, we can see that Multi-level governance is the part of two components. The first one is the reform of the state governance, which is a part of the fundamental cluster, and the second one is Article 22, which is directly responsible for the regional policy and management of the structural funds. So in our presentations, we tried to be close to text, and we tried to give you the brief of all these documents for you to understand on how and why it should work and what is actually multi-level governance. If we are talking about the first part, the article that is the block of the reform of the state management, that is not Article 22. That is, this article is a part of the fundamental cluster, which is the first one to open and the last one to close. So that is an important message. So what do we have in Ukraine? So we have that. In the report on Ukraine in 2023, on this block of the reform of the state governance, it is stated that there is a question of for the that Ministry of Regional Recovery of the regions, they have to have synergy of infrastructure for the regional development to stimulate the recovery and reconstruction on the local level. And let's return to the previous slide, which we were discussing on the characteristics. We have to understand that the first block on the coordination on different levels, mainly on the distribution of the mandate, that in Ukrainian reality, that is a law we should have adopted till the end of March, and now it is being amended on the final line, and we are saying that not all the authorities can be making decision, implementing it, and then to be responsible for it and be accountable for it. And in the planning of the implementation of the policies, these functions on the planning, on implementation, on managing and monitoring, they have to be distributed. And that is one of the properties of multi-level governance. And returning to our message on the fact that what is mentioned in the block of the reform of the state management in fundamental cluster, it is mentioned there that it is needed to systematically engage the local authorities and cohesion, and that is not even Article 22. That is something mentioned in the fundamental cluster, and we as the participants of the working group on Article 22, we will focus on what should be happening in the framework of Article 22. In the framework of Article 22, I'd like to draw your attention to a few small provisions which you can interpret in different ways, but we have emphasized the understanding what is multi-level governance and how it will affect Article 22. And that is, first of all, the issue of the amends in the state strategy of regional development and modernization of the state fund of the regional development. Why? Because we want to adjust them to the principles of multi-level governance and territorial regional policy. And the second block is enhancing coordinating framework of regional policy to provide systematic and inclusive engagement of regional and local stakeholders. So returning to what was said by Jolanta, the European Commission says it clearly. Dear colleagues, to be planning and implementing the regional policy for these foundations working in your country, you have to work and you have to develop the sustainable cooperation where the interest of the stakeholders, first of all, of the local authorities, are not something you see only on the level of the consultations when we are gathering the opinions, but it is also on the level of all of the implementation of the policy. When we are saying that we have to enhance the coordinational frameworks. Beside that, Article 22 explains to us that speaking of the administrative capacity, speaking of the administrative capacity, where it is clearly mentioned that regional and local stakeholders have to be more systematically engaged, and now attention to the next definitions, to the development. And after development, there is no full stop. But then we have implementation, and monitoring of these processes, meaning that if we understand clearly how multi-level governance works and how should Ukraine act to move with Article 22 for us to get all these capacities of managing the structural foundations. We have not only to engage the stakeholders on the development on the level of the planning, but also the stakeholders have to be engaged on the level of implementation, which is not working in Ukraine. Beside that, there should be also engagement to the monitoring of these processes. In some way, in Ukraine, we have the experience of participation in these kind of things like monitoring committees, like Yolanta has already mentioned, where we have this kind of forming of engagement of the members of the regional, local authorities, different associations, different civil society representatives to the monitoring committees which are participating the stages of planning, meaning they are the ones who are forming the document. They have their priority, their budget, their timeline, and then they are all these participants, they approve application forms, criteria, then they select the projects and they monitoring the implementation of these projects. So in the framework of Interreg, where Ukraine is participating, we have some slight experience on how we can work with different stakeholders for them to undertake the responsibility and for them to plan together, to implement together, and to monitor the programs to support regional development. The next slide, that is regarding the block on the accountability on reporting. What does the European Union want to see Ukraine doing for us to make the next steps? In the next block, which I would like to briefly mention, is how multi-level governance work for the members of the European Union for the implementation of the policy of cohesion in the framework of these joint management of the funds, so which means the transfer of significant amount of authorities with the funds for the implementation of the programs of reconstruction, recovery, both on the national and regional level, and the regulatory documents. It is said that the key thing there should be the principle of cooperation of and partnership, and it is based on the multi-level approach where we understand that the engagement of these partners is not just additional option, but it is the key issue to understand the regional policy when we are talking about the management of the funds, when we are talking about of finance management and any other type of management. And in this regulatory document, and in preamble of the document 1046, that regional and local stakeholders, sorry, that is wrong slide, this slide, the engagement of the regional, local, and city and state authorities. And now we are expanding this list. Civil society, academical, social partners, and where relative the research organizations and universities. That is what Yolanta mentioned in her presentation, and that is something I added because I know that interpretation of these terms might be different. I'd like to pay attention to the term, if applicable, relevant. Relevance and applicability is related to what is the area of the field of some certain program, because engaging this various stakeholders, these stakeholders have to be engaged depending on what they are doing. As for example, if we're talking about the development of the new towns and cities, we should have the association representatives, so we should have the representatives of the territories where we are working as a program, and there we should have the research institutes which are working with the development of the towns, and not, for example, the development of agglomerations or maybe some other processes in the economy. Properties of partnership. So I think I will make it briefer. Partnership So we have to have this kind of types, regional, local, and other authorities, economical and social partners separately the relevant authorities which represent civil society, and separately the research institutes. Why I'm emphasizing separately? For us not to substitute these terms, because we have to understand that the representatives engaged in the process of the implementation and planning and implementation and monitoring of the entire program, and not just on the stage that now we will do some public discussion and we'll engage all of you. So different participants have to be engaged during all these processes. And it's important to emphasize that these participants, these partners, the presence of these partners have to be kept till the end of this program. So we should not be choosing that, oh, today we invited from them. We shouldn't be choosing which one to engage. We have to be engaged in all these four categories of partners. That is Article 8 of the regulatory document of the European Union. And the second property of partnership, according to the principle, and that is mentioned in Article 8 of the regulatory document 1060, according to the principle of the multi-level governance and bottom-top approach, the state engages the partners to the preparation of the agreement of the partnership during preparation, implementation, and evaluation of the program. And what do we have at the moment? So from what we can see now, from what we observed in Ukraine, we have the situation that on the stage of the forming of the regulatory documents, on the stage of the approval of the strategy, on the stage of the collection of the comments, in this area, legislation is really working almost perfectly. And I would say even perfectly, considering the fact, knowing how it works in the other countries, and in the other countries it can be working in different ways. I think that in the last 20 years we actually improved it a lot. And that are public discussions, consultations with the population and the others. But there is another question: how can we help Ukraine to be progressing with Article 22? Because in 2024, according to the results reports of 2024, the progress with Article 22 is on the same level as we had in 2023, and therefore we have analyzed what can be done and how can we improve this process. And from what we have, and each country has different processes, different tools. Some have more of them, some have less of them. In Ukraine, typically we have a lot of everything, but unfortunately it's not working systematically, something, and sometimes we do not use it, but still we have it. And not to invent the bicycle this time, not to invent the wheel, we understand that we do not have the approach to the structural funds, so we do not have the tools of the assess funds for us to pilot something, to understand how can we improve this system of governance. But nevertheless, we have the other two, and we would like, and the European Commission has paid attention to one of these tools, and they said, please make it aligned to your strategic planning you have in the framework as a strategy with the tools you have for the implementation of this strategy. So what kind of tools we have? That is the State Fund for the Regional Development. And now take this strategic development, these tools for the development of these tools, and then use the multi-level governance and the development and the territorial development and the development of the territories, and you will get the model which will help you to understand how you can proceed being the member and implementing different programs of the structural funds. So for us to start moving forward and understanding what is multi-level governance, multi-level management, understanding what is partnership, the principles bottom up, and the stakeholder engagement, we have the situation when we have to understand what do we have in the state development fund. The Ministry of Regional has to develop the commission to open to launch the commission with the members of the committee of the Parliament of Ukraine on budgeting, and not less than 50% of this commission. And I'd like to underline a few things. The first thing is that 50% is half of the committee. It means that it's not meeting what we've said before, that is engagement of different stakeholders to the process of planning, managing, and monitoring. That is the first thing. And the second thing is that in this block, we have only one of the stages, and we have actually more of these stages. On this block, we have only the stage of evaluation and selection. And to provide this kind of synchronization with the policy of the European Union, different stakeholders have to be engaged on the development of the application form, on the defining of the priorities, approving the programs, monitoring of all of these projects, and not just on the stage of the evaluation and selection of the investment programs and projects. Why did I underline this provision? Before 2017, it has a bit, the wording was a bit different, and I can say that we had some messages which we could have represented much better during screening negotiations. It was said that the representatives of the civil societies are engaged to expert organizations, if I'm not mistaken, the scientific academic institutions and the others, and economical and social partners. In 2017, these amends were made, and that happened before 2019, and after these, they were not changing. And moreover, I can say that practically the state fund for regional development was not applied. And we have to think where we can find the way how to improve our progress without significant actions on Article 22. And therefore, recapping, dear colleagues, I'm very sorry, maybe I took too much time, but recapping what I wanted to say, considering the fact that we are on the stage of the preparation on the answers to the survey, and now we have the start of the analysis of the situation on dynamics in Ukraine in 2025, which will be presented in November 2025, and in November 2025 we will start of the screening on this process. And therefore, for us to be more prepared for screening, maybe we can make some changes to the screening. I think that would be not very difficult if we tried doing something, because the order we are talking before, that is not the law, that is the decree of the Cabinet of Ministers, and the amends are made there very easily. I think it can be done during 1 month, considering the fact that the state fund for the regional development is not working in Ukraine practically, and therefore I think that I'm confident that there will be no kind of issues with planning, with budgeting, or the allocation of the budget in the framework of this fund. I can say that these two, the stage fund for the regional development, is kind of on the theoretical level. It is not practical, and therefore it will not bring any kind of losses or turbulence because of the changes in the order. Of course, that is our key recommendation. And the presentation is quite significant, and the recommendation, in fact, is one and small. We tried not to write too much, but later we will add some other recommendations. But for us to move step by step towards this accession, and for us not to get lost, what should we do first? And therefore we have focused that we have to do something one article first. Of course, we can improve this process later, because we have another few things, and we have mentioned them in our research, and it is also the part of the programming, and it is something which has to be amended for it to meet the principles of the multi-level governance. Thank you very much for your attention. That's it from my side. I'm passing the floor to the moderator. I'm very sorry, maybe I took too much time, and I will be very glad to hear our colleague from the Parliament of Ukraine. Unfortunately, our colleagues from the ministry, as far as I understood, didn't join us. Very pity. Maybe they had some other events ongoing. Thank you, Rostislav. We have the question, but I think that we will first listen to our speakers, and then we will launch the small Q&A session. So with this, I'd like to pass the floor to Ms. Olena Shulyak, the head of the Committee of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine on the Organization of State Power, Local Self-Government, Regional Development, and Urban Planning. Greetings, dear colleagues. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for the opportunity to join this very important discussion. And of course, I would like to see the representatives of the ministries and the representatives of the regional authorities, and maybe even the representatives of the active social society, civil society, because the things we are covering today are extremely important. And Ms. Yolanta has already mentioned that it's kind of, triangle: coordination, stakeholders, transparency, and it has to be circulating in the framework of these triangle, because without it, as we have heard, without transparency, without understanding of the partnership engagement, we will not have efficient partnership with the structural funds of the European Union. First of all, on the 14th of May, the government has made a very good homework, which Marta Kos was mentioning before the meeting of the Council of Europe on the 22nd of May. We did all needed. We have approved the roadmap. We have approved the position on the first stage of the cluster to open the negotiations. In fall 2025, we hope that we will work on all the screening procedures on the Article 22, which you've mentioned today, and we have now the period of time when we have to be focused, as Ms. Marta Kos said, we have to do our homework on our different levels. Verkhovna Rada Parliament has to do its homework, and then the government has to do its homework, and of course, expert and circles have to do their homework, because in the process of your integration, we need to have the best synergy possible. So what I would like to talk about today. So it's such a pleasure for me to be saying today that Verkhovna Rada has fulfilled most of the tasks, so that our stakeholders were engaged in all the processes related to planning, monitoring, and evaluation. And I'm sure different processes, and we have approved the law on the public consultations, and it will be enforced after the end of the martial law. Of course, the experts society has lots of questions on the public consultations, so that they have to be conducted by Verkhovna Rada when they are making discussing the draft laws. Vice Speaker Alexander Kornit undertook the public responsibility, and together with him we will be working on the amendments to this law, on the members of the parliament, so for them to be for this law to be amended, and I'm quite sure that he will fulfill his obligations, and our law on public consultations will be almost perfect, as you said. The second law, which on the 6th of January 2025 was signed by the president, and it's already in force, that is the power of the people. And before 2026, all our communities, Hromadas, have to update their statutes. They have to add the modern procedures of the public engagement and the distribution of the budget funds and the other things. And I really like that in this law we have made a very important thing about the IDPs, and now they are the citizens, the residents of these Hromada communities, which have to participate the processes of the approval of different documents. And of course, I'd like to pay attention to Ukrainian youth. The new article about use and the engagement of use to the implementation of various policies. And by the way, I'd like to use this opportunity, and maybe the local authorities will be watching us. For example, use according to this new law, since 14 they are there 14 years, they can be the part of all the processes. And in Lviv, in use capital, they saw the statute of the city, and when we checked the statute of Lviv city, we saw that it's only 18 years, and therefore we would like to ask Andriy Sadovit to make the amends to the statute of the city and to provide the access for the use for 14-year-old youth to get the access and to be the part of all the processes in the youth capital of our country. That is the task we already did. And that is a very important part of the work when it comes to the work with stakeholders. And now we can see, we are kind of on the first stage of the work with the stakeholders, but nevertheless, I think that those grounds which were now approved by the parliament and they are going to adopt it through the statutes by the local government, I think that is a very good work, and this component of work with stakeholders, it can be very efficient and very resultative. I think that we can see that the business circles are not engaged. The activists, the civil society, some certain specialists, they are joining the process. But business circles, which have an influence on many other things, and specifically they have an impact on the funds and the opinion of the businesses, what can be prioritized, how it can be developing the region. So all of these things, they can have a very positive impact of engagement of the business circles to the processes which are related to the structural funds. So what else do we have to do as the Verkhovna Rada Parliament? So now we have two things we have to do. 13150, that is a draft law on the on the on the justification of the actions, and we will have the amends and very hard work in the framework of the committee, because we can see that there is the amends spam, which is entering through the registration of the amends. And the second very important draft law, by the way, it is not working. We just renamed it the working group established in 2023, but unfortunately it was not operating. And I hope that the Ministry of the Territories will be participating more actively, and they will dive deeper into these problems, and it will be about the distribution of the authorities. And that is something we are talking about for quite a long time, and this problem is not resolved. But in the framework of Ukraine facility and on the report on the expansion, I think that till 2026, as it is mentioned as an indicator of the fulfillment of Ukraine facility, this draft law will appear in Verkhovna Rada Parliament, and I hope it will be adopted. I hope without the delays, as it worked with the law 42 98, and it had no chances to pass through the committee, and therefore we are working on 13150, and I hope this process will not be politicized, because this is also very important. That are our home tasks, homework as the parliament. By the way, the parliament has ratified various programs, and we have, Yolanda has already mentioned that we have Interreg Next and Interreg Europe, and we have just recently we ratified Urbact, and of course that are not all the opportunities which will be provided to us, but nevertheless, the work with these programs helps Ukraine to form a very important experience, which we will be able to scale up for the work with structural funds. And now I'd like to return to a home task for our government. Let me repeat myself. I wish we had ministry here, but unfortunately, I'm sure that they also know what they have to do. In Article 22 and in the Ukraine facility plan, we had the necessity of the update of the national regional strategy. It was updated back in 2024. And as of now, the action plan is not updated, and the experts are looking at the action plan which was updated, and it's just in draft since January on the website. And of course the experts say that those steps which were suggested in the action plan, they are not making Ukraine closer to the European Union, but nevertheless we have to understand that at the moment, the strategy till 2027 seems quite weird, because that is a 2-year strategy and now it is being updated. Now we have the updated strategy for the regions of our Roma communities, but we understand that the full-scale war has destroyed all our plans on the updates and work on the national strategy of the regional development. But nevertheless, at the moment, the government has to be focused on developing and working on the new strategy, which will include the next period. Because with these dynamics, with this speed, as we observe now on the updates of the regional strategies, on the action plans, on how the decisions are made on the functional types of territories, and the other things, I think that is going to be, so to say, the barrier for the rest of the decisions which are related to the Euro integration process. The second topic related to our homework as the Ukrainian government, we started the work back in 2023, if I remember it correctly, on the optimization of the planning documents, which at the moment we have in Ukraine. And we were talking a lot and working a lot on the updated architecture of the documents. And as of now, we still have dozens of different documents in strategic development, spatial development, budget planning, and all of them. All of them are not aligned, and we have to take the work which was done in this area, and for this work to become the grounds for the development of the new acts on the new legislation, and to make it work. And the third thing I'd like to mention, that is the state fund of the regional development. And I deeply appreciate, dear colleague, that you are raising the issue of the members of the parliament who are engaged, and there is plenty of them engaged in this process. Back in 2023, the Verkhovna Rada has adopted the legislation which was not well perceived in the parliament, and that was a decision on the fact that through DIA, the population, the citizens, could have voted for different projects before they will be selected through the State Fund of Regional Development. And I 100% agree that we have to see there the projects which are mentioned in the strategy of development strategy and in the other documents. But nevertheless, I'm also confident that the citizens of Gramada communities, I mean the residents of these Gramada communities, they have to be the ones who choose which projects have to be implemented on their territory, but not 50% of the members of the parliament should be doing that. The current legislation, in my opinion, since 2018 or 2017 even, which is regulating the access of the members of the parliament to the decision making, and in my personal opinion, that the members of the parliament, the members of the village councils, city councils, they shouldn't be engaged in the process of the project selection, which have an impact of the life of the residents of this Gramada community. And in this case, we are ready to work with you on this to find the best solution. And by the way, that is kind of obligation of the reform to reform the state fund for the regional development. And that is something we have already defined. There are just a few words on what our government has to do as soon as possible. And I'm confident that the Verkhovna Rada Parliament will be a reliable partner for both the European Commission and for our regional and local authorities to find the balanced decision. I'm ready to answer your questions. Just a few more words. I just noticed it in my papers. A few words on the spatial issue which we're observing. You know that since the 1st of January 2025, we should have implemented the plans of the spatial development, and and according to there is an amendment to 95/9, and we have postponed it to the 21st of January 2026. But that is integral part of the regional, national, and local development strategies. And here I'd like to ask the local authorities, please, despite the fact that Verkhovna Rada has postponed the mandatory implementation of the spatial development, please do not stop. Continue this work, because without the wisely made documentation, without documentation of the spatial development, I'm confident that there is going to be no project which would be financed through structural funds, and soon we will have the opportunity to get access to them through our Euro-integrational process. And of course, you have to be working with documents of the urban planning of dated 1968, 1978, and even 1991. I think that is not something the country which is trying to build their modern future be doing. Thank you very much for the invitation. I think that we can be talking a lot about what we have to be improving, but altogether I'm confident we will manage it. Thank you, Ms. Elena. In fact, you have guessed one of the key questions, because one of the questions was the engagement of business circles, and therefore maybe we can skip this question. So the next, I'd like to pass the floor to our expert of technical support of implementation and management of NECBC, Mr. Albert Sorsol. Mr. Albert, the floor is yours.
Well, I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. I hear myself twice. Wait a minute. I don't know how to do it. Okay. Well, no. I mean, I wanted to stress a number of things. I wouldn't like to repeat what Jolanta already told you. You are in front of a huge challenge, which is trying to change the way that the public administration has carried out the relationship with the citizens, with the organizations, with all these stakeholders that we are mentioning in this famous code of conduct. And this change, you are willing to do it fast, and because of course there's this the accession to the European Union is a high priority. Therefore, all the management of the transition from the, let's say, the way that you have been working so far to the way that the European Union is working, especially in what concerns the management of these structural funds, it's not a small challenge. And the partnership principle is for sure one of the key changes in governance that you will need to tackle. So in that sense, I wanted to just stress several points. One is that well, first of all, when I was listening to Jolanta and also to Rostislav, we are so used to certain terminology that we are using when we talk about EU funds. We talk about technical assistance, we talk about territorial development, we talk about partnership principle, and this is not necessarily on the terms that are known, understood, that are, of course, may have a lot of interpretations, but especially that they have to be assimilated by the people. So the first challenge that I think that should be tackled very fast is capacity building. So there has to be a big effort in capacity building to all the institutions, to all the people that are working in all the institutions at all levels, to be able to manage these processes and to fully contribute to them. So you cannot contribute if you don't fully understand what we are talking about. So an investment in knowledge is one of my first recommendations. On this, I think that probably you can use the funds of the Ukrainian facility to do all this massive capacity building of all the stakeholders. You're a big country, so the amount of funds that should be devoted to this is not small. Of course, you can use, and it was already said by Jolanta, and also by Rostislav, that Interreg, you are participating in 7 Interreg programs. So somehow this is a kind of pilot experience where you can start implementing this partnership principle, when it is very important to involve the right stakeholders in every one of these programs, especially in the monitoring committees. I think that at the stage where we are, participation in monitoring committees is very, very important, but not only. Another challenge on this link to the use of Interreg programs is that the European Commission, the European Union is working on what's called the multi-annual financial framework. So it's working in long planning periods. So we are now in the period 2021-2027, but in fact all the implementation of the funds for this period will finalize in 2029. So this 9-year planning, it is also an additional challenge, and it should be taken into account. So now, for example, the Interreg funds are basically, or most of them are practically distributed, so there will be no new funds, which is not giving the opportunity, for example, to take full advantage of the priority on governance that might be taken into account. But please focus on how to support the participation of all the stakeholders in the monitoring committees. These programs are now implementing, so monitoring committees will have to follow up the implementation of projects, will follow up the evaluation of these projects. So how did they achieve the results or not? Were they successful or not? Very soon we are going to start preparing the new programs for 28-34. So all this long-term vision of what the country needs, on how it can contribute to the preparation to the use of these funds. How can the country also contribute to setting up the priorities of the European Union? All this is for me, it's a big challenge. So in any case, my recommendation on the monitoring committees is not to focus only on the very few people that will be able to participate, but ensure that all the voices are heard. And when you're talking about bilateral program like Poland, Ukraine, there it is easy to get at least regional actors in the monitoring committees. It's a cross-border program. It's not so difficult. All the meetings are in an area that you can go by car. But even if it is a closed program, at the end you have 5, 6, 7 persons there. So how you are able to involve all the stakeholders in the territory, local authorities, not only the big ones, and especially all these other actors. I also agree with the representative of your parliament that involving the economic actors perhaps is one of the gaps that you have in or at least that I have seen in the Interreg programs that I am participating. We have local authorities, regional authorities, sometimes some local authorities. Some civil society is participating, but we don't see much, at least in the monitoring committees, neither the academia, so universities and research centers, and we don't see economic actors, not only businesses or chambers of commerce or trade unions. So all these representatives should also be there. So you need to enlarge a little bit the number of actors of the territory that are fully participating. So that's my full focus. So try to find ways to get them on board to improve the capacity building. One small remark on the word technical assistance that was used by Yolanta at the beginning. When we talk about technical assistance in EU funds, we mean the part of the fund that is used for the program management. Okay, so then which is not exactly the term of the technical assistance that you have been using in your national legislation, which is more wide. It's more about all the funds received from donors. So in this case, the use of the technical assistance, that is the program management funds of Interreg, I think that this would be also an important opportunity. And it has to be ensured. Some of the programs like Danube or Interreg Europe are offering these funds. They can be used to organize awareness-raising events, information events, capacity building. So focus a lot on this, and start preparing the next programming period. I think that's very important. So use the current funds to fully or better understand as many people as possible how these programs work, because when you will get what we call the mainstream of the structural funds, so the European Regional Development Fund, the European Social Fund, this will be billions of euros coming to Ukraine. It's not it's not easy to be able to manage all these funds. So this and then this a little bit what chapter 22 of is about, is how will you be able to manage all these funds at country level, and for this you need to focus on all this preparation at full scale. So for me that would be the message of how you can use the current Interreg programs, but not only, perhaps also the Ukrainian facility, to use funds to do this huge, massive capacity building and preparation for the future use of funds. Just as a final remark, because I think that we're a little bit late, you have a very good neighbor, which is Poland. It is a country of more or less similar size, with that probably had similar challenges when joining the EU, which is not so far away. So I would also recommend you to strengthen the bonds with Poland. The way they are managing the funds is really a good practice of how to manage EU funds and how to manage all this partnership principle. So my last recommendation would be go to Poland, see how they work, understand how they made the transition from the old system to the EU system, and perhaps this can help you in accelerating this very important process. That's all from my side. I think it's important that we have time for questions and answers, if I understood. So Nadia, thank you so much.
Альберт, дякуємо.
Thank you, Albert, thank you very much for your speech. I will add a bit to what you've just said, to what you've said about recommendations on the capacity building. So what we are talking about a lot, Interreg and Interreg Europe and Urbana, or backed, and we have an open call, and in 2026 we have a call. It gives opportunity to the stakeholders from Ukraine to join and to raise their qualification from the perspective of the spatial planning and strategic planning and the planning of various programs, and also working with the various documents which need updates in Hromada communities, and therefore participation in these programs is very important, and our Hromada communities are joining these processes, as far as you know, and maybe we will recommend to everyone to follow the work of the TSIM project, which organizes different trainings for the Ukrainian communities which are just planning to join various programs. We have the question from the audience, as far as I understand. Thank you. Vitaly Zagalin, Center of Political Reform. So the first question two questions. So the first question: how do you see the Dream platform integration, and how? So because at the moment we have the situation where the state fund of the regional development is frozen, and that is a good opportunity to improve these things, because in fact what we can see, the full committee has to be the part of the commission which will make the final decision. I used to be the part of these kind of decision making, and I was the one of the first deputies of the head of one of the oblast administrations, and to be honest, that is a tough process, and that is definitely not the thing which is suggested by our European colleagues, and not something that is that should have been implemented at the moment. So considering the pause we have, considering the fact that we have time for the procedure to be at most, to make it at most efficient, and to be less corruption dependent, can you see the opportunity of Dream integration, a Dream platform, Dream 2 integration in the state fund of the regional development? Maybe the first question, and then I will ask another one. Thank you very much, and I think that we can organize a separate event on that. I will try to be brief. So the first thing, when we are talking about multi-level governance, we are talking about programming according to the criteria of the European Union. And therefore, if we have the priorities, the strategy of the regional development, for each of the priorities, we identify some certain program, and we we organize a group, and the minister organizes the stakeholders of multi-level governance, and they are engaged in the preparation of this program. In this program, we identify what do we want to achieve. So how we will be achieving the strategic target which we identified in the strategy. We identify the budget, we identify the separators, we identify the measures, actions, and the orders. And then we approve the program, and then we get funds. We establish monitoring committee with those who participate in the process, and there should not be the conflict of interest. So I mean, like the ones who are making the decision, they cannot be participating in the project. And therefore, we are saying that there are representatives of the associations and the others. And on this stage, considering the fact that the program and some department of the ministry, and let it be the state fund of the regional development, and in this case, this fund is kind of a separate office which is going to implement this. And this subject, which is responsible for the program, it develops as it works in the European Union. They develop their own financial tool where they are responsible for the funds they got for the implementation of some certain program with some specific indicators, with the target they have to achieve during 7 years. And why do we need this monitoring committee and the representatives of these sites? Not just everyone, let's vote for something and no responsibility for anything. And therefore, we identify some certain participation of all the engagement of all the stakeholders for the achieving of the indicators which were approved. So why I was explaining that in each program of the European Union, they have their own e-program. Through this e-program, the application forms are applied. Through these form, the auditors are checking information, and the monitoring committee can use it, and they can see everything that is happening in the program. That is not the public tool as DREAM is. That is a closed tool. It is with a permission for those who are responsible for this process and external participants who have to control the process. But nevertheless, there is a small window for this program for the applicants and those who implement the project. They see their own small part, and this tool has to be developed. And we can use either the one from the European Commission, or we will use our own. We will develop it. It's the thing we have to decide later. Can we use DREAM? I see some external factors. When I was talking to different stakeholders, I understood that the main message of DREAM is to show the publics that, look, everything is so transparent. But on the other hand, when analyzing that we have allocated the funds to IBU and the others, I cannot see what kind of projects won this information. That is a key information. Where can I find the list of the projects which are implemented in the framework of these or the other program? And in the programs where the European Union works, you can see the brief information on each program. You can find any project in open source. So that is the mandatory for the authorities which are implementing this project. And therefore, to synchronize DREAM with these process, in this case, DREAM have to be working internally to provide the transparency of the implementation of the process. And at the same time, at the moment, I can see that the external picture is working well. Everything is creative, infographics and the pictures. But to understand whether this project meets some certain indicators, we are financing this project. Why? In the framework of which program? In the framework of which initiative? How strategically on the level of the government we want to understand what we spend the money on. So we spent some certain money, and what? Was it efficient? So did we achieve the results we wanted, or we just implemented some certain project? So implementing just project is also an option. It's also a good way out. But nevertheless, can we synchronize it theoretically? Yes, we can, because that is a digital tool, and the digital tool, any kind of digital tool, can be synchronized with anything you want depending on the task you have. In the digital tools of the programs, you can upload the documents, you can upload the acts, you can sign the documents. The auditor can see it with their e-signature. They can prove your reports, and then the accountants and the tax authorities, they see these e-signatures. They give you the next tranche. So that is a big closed platform for the functioning of some certain financial processes. And if DREAM does it, because I have not worked with DREAM, and I do not know whether you have this kind of component. In this case, well, in fact, we can synchronize it depending on the results we want to achieve? Thank you very much. Maybe my answer was too long. Thank you very much, Ms. Olena. And then I have the question for you. So in Article 22, you pay a lot of attention to cooperation, multi-level cooperation. And as far as I understand, we are talking not only about the authorities, but also association. In this case, we have the question how we can change the existing legislation. And as far as I remember, we have the law on associations since 2008. And during the last 2 years, we are seeing that this legislation is outdated. And moreover, there are some certain situations when it cannot be followed, so implemented. So as the head of the committee, how can we change the law on the association of the government authorities to help to be able to use the funds of the European Union? Thank you very much for this question. I'd like to say a few words about DREAM. Through DREAM, we can implement lots of different things. The only thing we have to have is political will to be implementing it through DREAM. In DREAM, in fact, you can see, according to the idea, you can see how the project is appears and then how it is implemented. That can be through different funds, that can be national financing, local financing, or even private financing. And I'm quite sure that DREAM can serve as the tool for project management and to be kind of and it can help to implement the projects for a matter from the European Union. So any kind of technical settings are possible in DREAM, and DREAM is already the basis for the management of the public investment funding and recovery initiatives. So the only thing we have to be doing is developing it as much as possible for each citizen of resident of a community to see why do we have this project, why this is prioritized. And we can have various models there, but DREAM has to be used also for the work with the European structural funds. But speaking of the legislation on the associations, at the moment we have 4 associations on the national level. And some associations, let's be honest, they have their, so to say, politicized perspective regarding the amendments to the legislation. Do we need to update the legislation? Yes, we do. We have to update it also because now we are the part of the processes which we have never dealt before when this legislation was made, and that are the processes of recovery, the processes of the euro integration. My perspective as a person who is practically working with associations, we have to make it less political but to be more active. For these associations to be the associations of governance and not the voice of 5 big cities, which unfortunately can be sometimes stopping the consideration of the draft law. So that is a brief answer, because we have to be discussing these issues separately if we want to update the legislation on the work of the associations, because otherwise we can have the situation. So it's, for example, we have the law on the capital. It's not being considered. We have the law on the local administrations. We have the laws on, for example, the historical heritage protection in big cities, but nothing is moving because sometimes some political process are becoming the obstacle. But nevertheless, that is something we have to be speaking openly. And if we're talking about the changing and making the amendments to the law on association, in this case, we have to be honest, we have to be transparent for everyone to understand what is happening there. Thank you, Ms. Olena. Thank you for the question. And I guess that we have just a bit more time to ask one more question we have. And it is not written who it is addressed to, but I think that is for Yolanta, Albert, and Rostislav. Regarding the monitoring committee, how can we ensure the absence of the political of the conflict of interest, and what kind of processes and procedures do you have in the European Union? Who can be the first one to answer? I know that both of you, Jolanta and Albert, you can answer this question. Who would like to be the first one?
Thank you for the question. It's important question because each monitoring committee faces this problem. And well, I can mention we have financial regulation, so this is our, let's say, Bible for avoidance of conflict of interest. So if you go to the financial regulation in Google and tap conflict of interest, there is an article on that. So I would start with this. So we have some procedure and we have some guidance as well on that. And here I think I will ask Albert to complement because he knows better how it's done in practice.
Thank you, Jolanta. Well, first of all, I would say that the conflict of interest is just that we find it only when we talk about selection of projects. So I mean, this does not preclude participation in programming or in monitoring then the projects approved later on. But in this precise moment, what I see is that first of all, of course, the members of the monitoring committee are requested to sign a declaration. So and sometimes we find that these institutions have submitted proposals. So what they do at this stage is that at that moment in the meeting, they simply are invited to go out of the meeting. And when the decisions are taken, they are not there. So it is more important that they participate in the whole process, but in that precise moment that they are very honest and they simply they declare the conflict of interest. In the last, for example, I was in the last monitoring committee of Romania-Ukraine program, Interreg Romania-Ukraine, and some Romanian and some Ukrainian representatives at a certain moment during the meeting, they simply left the meeting. They allowed the rest of the members to take decisions without any conflict, and then they came back. It's quite simple, and normally it works very well.
If I may complement as well, because I agree that it's important to include for instance, members of certain sectors, civil society in the discussions of the monitoring committee, because their voice needs to be heard. But as far as the final decision is concerned, the voting, that's indeed another matter, because then you cannot really, they should not be voting on projects which directly affect them. But I would agree that they would that it's important that they are actually involved in discussions because they have something interesting to say usually.
Thank you. Дякую.
Thank you, Jolanta. Thank you, Albert, for clarifications. And indeed, the work of the monitoring committee is in the regulations of the European Union, 1060, 1059 we've mentioned today, and they are stating exactly the same, and you can see that it is regulated quite well there. So maybe the final words. And let's start. Jolanta, you will be the first one. The closing word to close these events. 15 seconds. Your impressions and maybe the quintessence recommendation for our listeners.
Thank you very much, Nadia. Well, I'll be very brief. I think that, well, I appreciate your initiative. I think this initiative is extremely important. And as Albert already mentioned Poland, and me being Polish, I feel like saying that, well, 20 or 30 years ago, this partnership principle and multi-level governments didn't really work in Poland, but now it does. And as an example, I can tell you that representatives of the civil society are themselves organizing meetings and inviting government side So they are the initiators of discussions on certain subjects. So the situation has been reversed a bit because they are actually forcing certain solutions on the government. And the government in the spending of structural funds as well, and so that they became strong partners. So but it's a process. It's a long process, and to complement what Albert said as well, there is a real need of capacity building. Even as a practical solution, I would say that stakeholders should be really invited in preparation of territorial strategies, for instance, with experts to do a so-called SWOT analysis, so strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. As a practical example, what can be done to involve them and increase their ownership for the local territorial development of their areas. So that's it from me. Thank you for inviting me.
Дуже дякуємо, Йоланта.
Thank you very much, Yolanta. With this, I'm passing the floor to Albert. 15 seconds, Albert, for closing words.
Thank you so much. In fact, Yolanta said at the end what I wanted to say, so I will not just take my last recommendation. Take the last slide from Yolanta that I assume that you will distribute. There's a link to territorial development tools, and if you use these tools, if you start testing the process of preparing this kind of territorial development strategies and territorial development tools, I think this is also, on top of Interreg, a very nice area where you can have pilot experiences on partnership principle. So I would just like to thank you for inviting me, encourage you for this big challenge that you have in front of you, and I hope that we can meet again. Thank you so much.
Дякую, Альберте.
Thank you, Albert, and we will see you soon. Rostislav, 15 seconds as well. Dear colleagues, thank you so much. Recapping what I would like to recommend to all of you. As for the ministry, which is responsible for Article 22, they have lots of different challenges. The problem is that we do not have the tools which could have given us some certain framework and could have helped us with some small finances for technical specific support to pilot the allocation of the funds. But we have the other ways, the other formats, so we can be using the framework of Article 22, and therefore we can have two scenarios. The first scenario is that we are waiting till 2028, and when we will be finally given the tools of these assistance, we can start thinking on how can we launch the regional development. But I think that this kind of scenario is not something the winners do. But considering the fact that we are in 2025 we are doing something, we have to be using the other scenario, and we should take the state fund for the regional development, and we have to take the framework we have and to create the new tools on its basis. And two more comments. The law, well, we have to understand. The law on the distribution of the authorities, if it will be adopted, that will not be the victory of Article 22, that will be the victory of the fundamental cluster. It means that we will not get some results on Article 22, and the development of the system of public investment project system, that is not going to be the victory of Article 22, because the system they are using, that is not something that is mirroring the provisions of the regulation 1060, 1059. And therefore, let's return to the tool we have, the state fund of the regional development, which we can, as my colleague in the audience said, we can improve the legal basis. It is not going to be difficult because now this tool is not being used. Dear colleagues, thank you very much. Ms. Yolanta, Ms. Albert, let me also take 15 minutes. So indeed, 10 years ago, we didn't know that we have this kind of tool, the tool bottom, top, or any kind of discussions, decision making, take in account all the opinions of the residents and the other things. We are just learning how to work with stakeholders and how we have successful results, so we can show and we can scale it up to different communities, and that is something we are going to do. If we're talking about recovery and the principle build back better, in this case, when we're talking about the real decentralization, about the residents, about citizens, that is a principle bottom top in decision making. And I'm quite confident we can ensure that. A few words about the state fund for the regional development. For lots of years ago, this fund, it used to be very corruptional thing for some members of the parliament from the major political party, for them to be re-elected again. And now the legislation has changed, and now we do not have the majoritarian political system. At the moment, we shouldn't have the principles we used to have 10, 15 years ago. And the state fund for the regional development, it cannot be something that can be used in the framework of Article 22, but it can be the tool which can very positively and very resultatively has an impact on the development of the region. So thank you very much for raising this issue, because thanks to Mr. Vitali and also his question about this fund, because this is not something that we have to be forgetting. We have to raise this question and we have to be discussing it on different platforms to find the best decision possible. And I'd like to thank our European colleagues. With your help, we can transform the best practices, and with your support, we can manage your integration process faster. So thank you very much for the support we feel every day. Thank you, Ms. Olena. And I'd like to add also that we will have the recording on the website of the Ukrainian Institute of the Ukrainian Policy, and also on the website of Ukraine Crisis Media Center. And the research will be also posted till the end of the day. Please visit our website. Thank you, dear speakers, Ms. Olena, Ms. Jolanta, Mr. Albert, Mr. Rostislav, and see you next time. Have a nice day. Goodbye.